Table Talk is not your typical D&D TTRPG podcast. We are not here to run you through our whole campaign.
We're here to talk about everything else in the space of tabletop roleplay.
I'm your host, Alejandra Wilhelm.
And I'm also your host, Mariah Gresham.
And we're your tabletop roleplay girlies. Alrighty, and we are live again with another episode of Table Talk. Thank you so much for joining us yet again. It is your Table Talk girlies. It's just me, Alejandra, and your other host,
Me, Mariah.
And we are also joined by a very exciting guest. Would you like to give us a quick little intro, as well as all the really cool, fun things you're doing that I can't wait to get into?
Yeah, my name's Cody with the DungeonMasterDiary. I'm a fantasy cartographer. I make maps for tabletop RPGs, publications. I've done work with like Tor through Macmillan and a few other I don't know, I guess you'd say publications, but I also do other things too. I'm a published author myself. I have a fantasy map tutorial book coming out through Page Street Publishing, and I also produce audio dramas. I have a project coming out very soon called The Long Rest. But yeah, that's me. I'm Cody. It's good to be here. I'm so excited to chat the both of you up and just vibe. I think this is going to be great. Yeah.
Yay. Awesome. Well, we are going to get into your audio drama because you sent us a fun little secret teaser.
Yeah.
But first, I want to start with, obviously, you've had your kind of hand in the game for a while.
Yeah.
Talk me through a little bit about what your overall like TTRPG history is. I mean, we've been mutuals for a while just from your maps, which I'm in love with.
Thank you.
Yeah,
that's how it started.
I followed your maps accounts for like ever.
Yeah.
Just because I geek out over that.
Yeah.
Way back in the dark ages of 2017, in the aftermath of like very scary times for the world, especially the United States, I got into D&D as an escape. I think everyone did. And a couple of my friends said, hey, let's play D&D. None of us had ever played before. And we sort of like rock, paper, scissored for who was going to be the DM.
Mm-hmm.
And I DM'd, but I'm very analytical about things, like a little bit too in depth. And so as we were like adventuring in the game, I needed to catalog where it is that we were going. So I found myself like drawing, like as we were going and like pointing things out. And by the end of the game, it was not a great D&D game. I hadn't found my footing yet as a DM, but the maps were decent. People in the game really liked them and they encouraged me to post them on social media. And I did. Way back in 2018, I started posting fantasy map content on Instagram and then graduated to TikTok and Facebook and YouTube and Twitch and everywhere. And then it just kind of took off from there. And I'm very, very lucky at the doors that it's opened for me. Fantasy cartography has put me in contact with some really amazing people and it's just given me some really good lifelong experiences and friends for sure.
Heck yeah. I always feel like everybody, when they get into, especially like being in charge, being the GM of your respective game, one, everybody has a different kind of style, but there is always something that like you kind of fixate on about like your
something
world.
anchors you.
Like there's people that are like all in on mechanics, or some people that are all in on like the lore of it all, or like the setting, the maps, all of that.
Or like the character voices. Like you ever seen those very animated DMs that are just like,
yes,
they're just going nuts. They're standing up and they're doing voices for every NPC. It's just like, it's
my
theater
kingdom for that ability, truly.
Yeah. I still think I'm going to have a few moments where in my VTM campaign, I stand up and take a little stroll. Just like, I don't do it, but like, it's so like when I do it, it'll be extra unsettling.
We'll just be shitting ourselves the entire time.
Yeah.
Having a panic attack. Like, wait, they're up. Is it over? Are we dying?
No.
Like, what's going on?
It's like, no, everyone else stay seated. I'm just taking a little jaunt.
Correct.
Yeah.
Or those moments that you're like, I need everybody else to leave the table except for this particular person. And then it just stresses everybody.
What if
it's like, what do you mean?
like in D&D when you're fully immersed, or any tabletop RPG, and the GM is like, hey, everybody, can you dip for a second? Like, that's like ultimate power move stuff. Like,
yeah. Because then you're putting them in a separate little timeout room.
Oh, I'm like, yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Just like, bobbing, like,
go to your kennel.
Exactly.
The adults are talking. It's like,
correct.
Okay.
So true.
Shit. My bad. Oh my God. No, I'm like, I can't do character voices. I wish I could. Maybe I'll get better with time, but
I don't really do them either.
I do a lot more of like the body language changing for like the specific NPCs and like a little bit of inflection, and that's kind of what separates it.
Like a style of speaking to you, like cadence and volume and
correct
things like that. But
my little like DM flex is like whenever it is like a big time NPC's intense moment, like the register of a mom voice that will shut my players up so quickly is very that's my one skill that I'm like, yes, I've done well with this.
Outside of fantasy maps, I have 2. They are now tried and true, and people know to expect them if they've played with me for a long time. But under my belt, I have 2, maybe 3 long-term campaigns that are like, multiple years, right? Level 15 and higher sort of games that as they've went on. And I had a long con where like the Underdark was like the big like thing that they were like worried about. Like they're like, oh, we got to get there. This is the culmination of our campaign, all that kind of stuff. And drow were super rare. And we finally got to the Underdark, and everyone had like really terrible Australian accents, and they couldn't like figure out why. And then finally one of the players just looked at me and was like, are you serious? And I was like, yeah, dude. And like he knew like right away, like after like maybe like 5 minutes, and they're like, is this a Down Under joke? And I think I had ruined the campaign, like 2.5 years of effort. Then they give me this fabled place that they went through hell and high water to get to. It's like, all right, good eye, mate, for Patty. Let's get down here and go down. But like,
exactly,
they're just so
like,
unimpressed.
really, my guy?
Yeah,
it was
like,
so bad.
Like, this is the voice fuckers. Here we go.
Yeah, it was so bad. And then the other is, I have one voice that I do, and it's not good. It's very bad. And I'll do build up for a long time. It's always like a bad guy or an important political figure. And then they sound like Kermit the Frog.
Fucking incredible.
And I'll deadpan like, yeah, how can I help you? Yeah, go ahead.
I think I would lose my shit.
And they're like, wait, are you burping? Like, what's happening? Are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm totally fine. What's going on?
Like, is this for real? This is the person that's been menacing us for.
That's why they're evil. Because they sound like Kermit the Frog.
Yeah. Hey. What therapy could have solved had they just got therapy?
God, no.
Those are the 2.
No. Incredible. Yeah, no. For me, I think it's definitely the mom voicey moments, and then the one we're like such a role play heavy table, but I hyper fixate on the social plotting and scheming of everything going on between the NPCs, everything that's like reacting to what the PCs are doing. My fucking web of butterfly effects that are happening at all times is lengthy and intense. And that is where I'm knee deep. Do I know anything about like the extensive lore of my world yet? No. Do I know everything going on within the social dynamics of every person that's been introduced? Yes.
It's like D&D and Sims combined. Like it's just like the network of relationships in the Sims. It's just perfect.
Correct.
I also fall into that hell, and then like I'm obsessing over the relationship between 2 NPCs that will likely never see the light of day in the campaign. No one will ask. It will never be relevant. But I care so deeply, and I'm like, what? Why have I done this to myself?
It's truly the bane of every DM that ships. Like every dungeon master, game master that has like 2 NPCs, like we have Baron, this like wayward aristocrat that went on to become a paladin of redemption, who's literally an NPC, who fell in love with like the literal harbinger of darkness, a man called Vercingetorix. Their male to male romance is legendary in our home game, to where our campaign shifted to just facilitating a healthy dynamic between these 2 NPCs. That was their main arc. Like, how do we get these 2 like uber powerful NPCs to like reconcile their love? And that was their whole fixation. That's right.
Fair.
Like, they're like, oh, what do you mean? Baron has red hair? Oh my God. Like, it has red hair. Like, it's so cute. It was
incredible. I had the instant like recollection of the one TikTok sound that's like, well, he wasn't the harbinger of death when I was dating him. Like, that came after.
It was after. It's so funny.
Fucking incredible. Okay. I want to dig into the audio drama because we got
I sent you a top secret version that's like 8 minutes of the first scene.
Yeah.
And each episode's roughly 12 to 13 scenes, about an hour long. But what did you two think of the first like snapshot, like just the first 8 minutes?
Mariah, you don't want to go first? Go for it.
I can, yes. Like, I'm a writer as well. So, like, and I'm trying to plot out writing like a horror audio drama.
Mhm.
So I obsess over stuff like this all the time. And like, I'll say like the staging of it, but like not, it is a bit like when you're writing for an audio drama, you're writing for like a novel. It's still a bit like staging a play, right?
Yeah,
And like
I agree.
the staging of it was so good. And I liked the panning in and panning out of the
Yes.
different perspectives of like this sort of, I mean, we don't know their whole deal, obviously, because it's an 8-minute teaser, but this sort of like deific figure that seems to be pulling some puppet strings, and then like panning in to like what the characters are going through, which is like a very intense, dangerous, emotional moment where it's like there's one character that may or may not make it, and they're trying to get out of a dangerous situation, and like that juxtaposition was really fun. And it was like, yeah, I was just staring. The art for the characters is also beautiful. I adore that art style.
Yeah,
Stunning.
we're so lucky. Yeah, we're
Yeah.
so lucky.
Absolutely stunning.
But like, it did a thing that I think is hard to do well, which is like initially sink you into the world. Like
Yes.
within
Yeah.
the first moments, and you're like, okay, we're here, we're doing this. And that grabbing is hard to do well, but when it's done well, it's
Oh, thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, the hook of that was very, very good. I think I also loved, and I may have had the advantage of like, obviously I was looking at your Kickstarter page as this was going on.
Sure. Yeah.
So I'm literally looking at the picture of the characters and the actors. And as
Same,
I'm
yeah.
listening, I'm like picking up the names and who's what and whatever. And I think everyone has a very distinct voice in it, which is very hard to do, especially with like the large cast that y'all have for this. Because I listen
Yeah.
to audio dramas like nobody's business, and oftentimes it is like scenes that are separated by like 2 or 3 characters at a time, but to have so many in one scene is definitely a challenge, and to have them all be able to be distinct and sound distinct and like starting to be quickly, easily identifiable. I think that was done
you can
really,
pick
really
out
well.
like, oh, there's a healer medic type character, there's some kind of like commander or somebody who's like
Yeah.
organizing, being like, hey,
the
let's GTM.
aristocratic,
The more
woman.
aristocratic characters, you can kind of start filling in some blanks
You got it.
immediately, which was cool.
For us, that was like the biggest focus, because we lose all of the other medium that kind of tells you everything you need to know about a character, right? Like silhouettes and color schemes and physicality, all of that is divorced in an audio drama. And when we were writing it, so I wrote the first draft of the first episode, and then I brought in a really amazing writing team to help me like break this thing down. So now we're a 4-person writing team.
Sick.
But as we're kind of like messing with this and casting the show, which is a whole interesting story too, I posted on social media a casting call and got the gamut. I got several hundred people from like never acted before to like people with IMDb pages, like
Yeah,
came
that's
to like,
awesome.
which was super rad, right? It was so much fun. But what I decided early on about the voice thing, because I knew I was going to divorce myself of all the other tells for a character, is I had to find people that weren't doing 2 things: that they weren't doing a voice, that they were acting as themselves with their own voice. So our British UK characters are actual, or characters that are from that land-esque, if you will.
Mhm.
They're from the UK. Like the 2 people are acting; those are their natural speaking voices, which is beautiful.
Oh,
Yeah.
Emily
interesting.
Graymore
Okay.
and Ethan Emery playing Megarathiel Barrington Quinn and Caden Rome,
A
respectively.
long ass. I love a bitch with a long ass name.
Yeah,
As
she
a
earned
bitch
it
with a
too.
long ass name.
Yeah. And you just got to own it. You just got to rock it. Some of
Yeah.
it are full name. There's middle names we left out. But those 2 people, we wanted them from like where they were supposed to sound like in the fantasy world. So we found actors that were from that part of the world. And then with like Thomas, who plays Garrick, that very commanding character, is like, Caden, get that damn lantern over here. Move. That guy.
He was so good.
He's incredible. Like they're all so good. They're all so incredible. He is super dad, voice actor, and a teacher, educator of children. And so like the dude's got a commanding presence, and it just worked, right? So we did that. We made sure that everybody was able to act in their own voice. It was like voice acting, but lowercase voice, uppercase acting is what it was.
Correct. Yeah.
And that's just how we ran it. And it was really a very lucky stroke of genius, I think, to get the caliber of people that we did. And how we record is the other part. We record ensemble. So we bring everybody together in a Riverside studio, just like this, at once. And we do a dry run of the script. And then we just hit record and we act it out. And then whenever there's a flub or a stop, we end it and then start a new recording, and like until we can get through the scene. So normally in voice acting, you record your lines independently. In this case, together. We're doing it ensemble. So every call and recall is reacted to in real time. And everybody, we arrange their cells so they're looking at each other. And it just changed everything. It made it just, like in our eyes, something really special.
100%. That's very cool. That's something I've thought a lot about too, because like you can kind of tell, like, I mean, people who are always professional voice actors are fantastic regardless, but like it is different when you can feed off people's energy, whether they're in person or whether they are on Riverside, where you can see their face, like see some of their posture, at least from like the bust up, and like you said, have that timing be real.
Yeah, it was awkward at first. People were like, what do you mean? Like, I thought I was signing up for something I could record on my own passively. And we're like, we could totally do that. But we're trying to capture like lightning in a bottle and like get people really like, especially for the first scene, which the both of you have heard, it's very media ray, like you were just dropped into chaos immediately.
Yeah.
And that energy, like we had everybody literally standing up, like doing jumping jacks. Like before we recorded that scene. Yeah. And then everybody put your headsets on, and then we hit record, and they're like, Lyra, wake up. And like you could feel that energy. It was so much fun. It was
that exhaustive breath and the
that's fun.
Adrenaline pumping.
Yeah.
That's so sick. I love that.
Your thoughts about writing it, Mariah, is just, it's very similar. That staging is very, very similar.
Gotcha. It very much reminded me of the way that we've talked about it multiple times, where it's like the difference between playing at a table versus playing online with, just Roll20 and no cameras or anything. Mm-hmm. I love my online campaigns that I'm involved with and the stories that we tell, but it is an element of like, you're a little bit detached because obviously you're able to get distracted or do other things while other like scenes are playing out that don't involve you. As opposed to when you are sitting at the table and you are engaged and you are watching the people physically react to the scenes, even when you are not involved, it feels like I'm still invested and still present in what's going on. So I feel like that dynamic very much translates into this, where the way that you've chosen to do it is exactly that people can react live in the moment to each other and make the scene feel like everybody's present in a room.
Yeah, that was the goal. That's a really great analogy. We tried not to think about tabletop RPGs so much because we had so much tabletop RPG talent in there. Like the moment we started talking about D&D, we'd get derailed so hard. But that is a perfect analogy. Like we'd be metagaming in the lobby for sure if we brought D&D while we were recording it, min-maxing all of our characters.
Correct. That's incredible. How are you? So there is an interesting element of the way that you have the party set up, and then also having this, is the deific character meant to be like kind of an omniscient narrator over the party? Throughout the drama?
Yeah. So without giving up the goose, because there's lore for everybody, and the only spoiler I'll give is that they're all going to interact at some point, like throughout the story, right? That the distance between the two like interacting points, that veil's going to get thin, and over the course of the story in a really interesting and fun way. But the premise, the idea is a party of 7 goes into a ruin and comes out a party of 7, but they've interchanged one person for another. So like without spoiling too much, like they go into the ruin, they're missing their leader, they're panicking about it. But one of the people in that group came out of the ruins with something within them. So then as the story progresses, these 6 people are now determined to find their missing leader. And over the course of that pursuit and that investigation, trying to find them, this entity manifests within one of the characters, and it starts to devolve into a very supernatural psychological thriller, and like the breaking down of like the fundamental aspects of like a group or a party when they're met with like great conflict. Think of like high fantasy or mid fantasy Lord of the Flies with like grown adults, and everyone has like a really like troubled past. Very, very intense. But that narrator character, he's called Katomi, played by Dallas Goldtooth. And Katomi is sort of like an omniscient observer. He is a deity from like an ancient pantheon. And in that ancient pantheon, he is like a trickster god. And that pantheon is now gone and defunct, and not a lot of people believe in them anymore. And he's sort of a layover from a bygone era. And you can hear in the teaser that I shared with you guys that he does some like call and recall name recognition. Like he's like, oh, that person. Wow. Like, and that's an ode to his very like ancient past, and a little Easter egg about that character that they're sort of like looking for too. So
Yeah, there was only little moments I was catching that I was like, this is like an important little snippet.
Yeah, that was interesting. Yeah, that little bit was fun. Because that character discussed is your character, correct?
That is correct.
That you voice.
Which was a last minute decision. So which is a crazy thing. So like originally I was just going to write the show and produce it and cast every role. And as we were progressing, my team, as we were going through rehearsals, was like, we really think you should play Adelis. Like you do voiceover work on your TikTok maps and Instagram maps all the time. It would make a good villain voice. And I was like, I don't know, I'm not sure. And they cajoled me into it. And we did some tests and we really liked it. And for plot reasons, I won't give them up. I would love for people to listen and find out. I also play the voice of the entity that comes along with one of the other characters. So the very first male voice you hear in the show, you hear Lyra as Sarah Roberts as Lyra, and the first male voice is mine, that supernatural entity.
Heck yeah, I didn't even think about that.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, so that was me. Spooky vibes.
I'm gonna have to go re-listen.
I was wondering about that, but I didn't know if I was gaslighting myself, and I was like, so yeah, that does make sense.
Yeah, I've been there. I've gaslit myself a ton. It's a habit. You didn't do that. You didn't remember that.
Nah, never.
You're acting crazy, Cody.
Okay, so Mariah's mentioned it, but we have something in the works. It's like probably a year or two long project now, but like we're going to be writing it an audio drama, and we're gonna enlist help from Kate to possibly help cast that. Kate the Great cosplay. What advice would you give us as somebody that's currently acting?
I am so glad you asked. So every lesson you can learn about this process, we have learned in real time because we've been doing this for a year. We had casting in September 2023, and we're now in September 2024, and we're just now done with episode 1. Though it is a very big ensemble cast and a lot of moving parts, and there's a ton of things going on. Like Dallas was at the Emmys like last weekend, and then was like in a recording studio, like helping with stuff. So like just the moving parts were hard, but we took notes on everything, like from what mics we used to the settings we used to the recording or the editing studios we used, how to soundscape, like how to position people in 3-dimensional spaces, down to like what's the best process for casting people. So we can talk about any of those things and I'll be happy to answer them, but like what's one of the things where you're like, oh, I'm not sure like how we're going to do this part, and if you prompt me I can kind of give you a little bit of an insight on how we did it.
That's a good question. Oh, it's one of those things where it's like the can keeps getting kicked down the road because like life has been insane this year, and like I moved and all like work stuff has been crazy, so like I haven't started the writing. But I think going back a little bit to how you said like casting people that like having people use their actual voices. Yeah. Like, did you always know you wanted to do that? Or
I did.
Okay.
And the reason why, and I never got to it earlier, and I said there was 2 reasons why, and I said one, and then we just moved on because I have ADHD. The reason why is that because we lost the visuals of the characters, because it's audio specific, if anyone is projecting themselves into a voice that is not their own, and you put them under duress in a scene, like they're acting, if not, they're not a professional.
The consistency.
Their dialect will slip. And that is magnified tenfold when you don't have physicality to back it up. So if you cast people and they're doing a voice that is not their own, my encouragement to you is to put that under rigorous test, not both in like ability to maintain, but consistency from take to take to take before you adopt it, because your listeners will be able to pick up on it very, very easily if someone drops dialect. Some of these people are professional voice actors, like Dallas is a professional voice actor, Thomas is a professional voice actor. And I was like, I understand, but trust me. And it was the right choice, because even some of the tests we could tell it was they convinced me to let them try, and we tried.
Yeah.
And then when I played it back for them, they're like, okay, I hear it.
Yeah.
So that role playing your own voice or acting your own voice is just going to give you a huge leg up. Then you have
absolutely.
the decision of making, like, how do you differentiate between voices? How do you identify the right sounds that aren't going to compete with one another in an audio medium, which was a big focus for us as well.
Gotcha. In the element of writing the drama, obviously you mentioned you started writing it, you've adopted a team of writers. How does that function as far as if you have multiple people on a writing team?
Yeah.
How do y'all go about fleshing out the plot of this as multiple people having input, and how does that kind of work out?
So there's a lot of trust. And so I am for those of you listening, I am a 30-something cishet white guy, right? And if I'm writing an audio drama or a book or whatever, there's going to be parts of the world that I'm just going to miss. So the moment I got this production going, the first thing I did is I went and found a writing team that was extremely different than me, both phenotypically and then also representatively on different spectrums, whether that's ADHD. We have a writing team that represents the trans community. We have the people on the writing team that are the whole LGBTQIA plus 2 spirit spectrum is represented on our team, which is amazing, and specifically in the writing team. And then we also have, people of color and BIPOC creators that are part of that team. And it just sitting down with them, telling them what my vision is, and then trusting that they could elevate it with not just changing things that were just going to be better or worse for my idea, but also just giving the representation and the voice a chance to flourish. So how we did it is I told them, just like I'm talking to you in an oratory sense, what the vision for the show was, and they all took notes. Then we had a second writing meeting and we compared notes, and I realized that all of their interpretations were slightly different. And they highlighted things that were important to them and their ideas and their ideological pathways in their brains. And we found those things that stuck out to them, and we elevated those parts of the story. Once we got that out of the way, I provided a rough outline, 1 episode through episode 8. And then they started filling in what scenes would make the most sense. And then I started editing those scenes. And then once we had a really great structure, we started filling in the episode content, which is another person that was hugely instrumental in the structure of the writing is a person named Patrick Perini from Unbalanced Encounters podcast. Great dude. He's the scene director for my production as well.
Incredible. Okay.
But that collaborative writing thing, who here's a control freak when they write? I don't like to give up anything. When people edit my stuff and they're right, I'm like, you're totally wrong. I don't agree with you. You're insane.
It's a thing of I have to fix my brain for it. And or there's a level at which I will allow things to be edited, and it's when I feel it's dressed and ready to leave the house and be presentable for company. And until then,
it will not see the light
it from my cold dead hands, or
so
lobotomize it out of my brain.
I'll say this, and this is something that I had to face from my writing team. So this is not projected at you. This is projected at me.
It's fine. It can be projected at me. It's probably going to be a clean read.
They were like, hey, we're never going to get momentum on this because your life is moving way too fast for us to be able to help you. So either you divorce yourself of ownership and share the ownership of the writing, otherwise we'll just be in limbo indefinitely. And that was a really good wake-up call for me. And I still get reminders, right? So writing a story, a script versus writing the outline of a script and then being able to course correct, right? And then delegating the writing to those things. It's a hack. It's a feature. It's a positive thing. As long as you have a true north, right? A true north for every character, a true north for the arc. And then, but the curve of that arc or the ellipse of that arc might look different. But if your start, middle, and end point are the same, and you have your team help you flesh that out, it'll only be better for it. That's the encouragement they gave me, and one I would give anyone else.
Yeah, that definitely resonates because it is like there's so many schools of thought on this. It's like when you sit down and write the first draft of something, you just like word vomit onto page and get it out of your brain, right? But it's like, but that's different when it's an audio drama, right? Because you're kind of writing, like you said, like you wrote the skeleton of the thing first, and then you write the scenes. And that, again, I love a good overthink. I love to make something more complicated than it probably needs to be. But like that is kind of what I mentally find myself getting hung up on, is like, how do the scenes break down? How does the pacing break down? Like over the course of a season, over the course, like how many episodes do you want a thing to be? Like if the episodes are like yours an hour or 15, 20 minutes or whatever, like what? And then I'm just down the rabbit hole of, well, I think myself
and then
into
it becomes
a corner.
like decision
And
paralysis.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, so I experienced that too, regularly about some very big things, and what I decided, and this is how we ended up on 8 1-hour episodes. I was like, do I want like personal, intimate, one-on-one scenes that are 12 to 15-minute long and just have dozens of those and have like a huge anthology that tells a disparate story, which is a cool idea, but that we were never going to get anywhere. We just weren't going to get anywhere doing that. And so I just said, okay, here's my framework. 8 episodes, 1 hour long. I'm not divorcing myself of that. We're going to marry ourselves to that. And then we're going to write the coolest story possible that fits within that framework. So we have 8 episodes to characterize, give conflict, partial resolution, pitfall, more conflict, and then resolution, whatever we got to do, flashback episodes, whatever. We got 8 episodes to figure it out. And then I tasked the writing team with making that possible. How can we tell this super cool story with 8 characters in 8 episodes and give everyone a satisfying arc? Once the framework is there, it's like playing any sport or any board game. Once you know the rules, you can then operate within them. But until
once the fence is up,
until you identified the boundaries, you're never going to know where to stop. And it's oversimplification saying it that way, but it's very true.
And if I can ask a follow-up question that is, I'm aware the same problem and making it worse. Did you scale it out to only be a 1-season thing? So it's like everything that, or is it intended to be a second season? Because that's also in the brain spiral as well, right? Where it's like, does everything you introduce in the first season get resolved, or is there? I mean, obviously, there's a lot of interweaving of plots, especially with like having such a big cast. You can do so much.
So we tell a complete story. And if and when we do a season 2, that story will pick up 5 years later. And
interesting.
So we tell a very satisfying arc. It does not go well for everyone. Spoiler alert. Like, just to put that out there. Like
fair enough.
I got a couple
they
darlings.
They all retire on the beach.
And we all know what happens to our darlings. But yeah, like the ending is satisfying and it's powerful and it feels really good. I get emotional thinking and talking about it. But it does leave something to be desired for the world and the characters that have made it through this environment. And you just wonder, what are they going to do after this thing? Like after this moment in their life is resolved, where will they go? How will they end up? But they, you got to get to that point. And the answer is, we know we want to do multiple seasons. And we know that we have, I guess you'd say, like the lightning in a bottle to do so. But the thing that we had to become married to is that, what if life changes for one of us, one of the cast, one of the writers? What if we want to do something else? What if our feelings change on the project and we want to graduate on? So writing one complete story and making sure that it's a satisfying and justifiable end, that was our focus. Leaving the door slightly ajar to write more stories. Of course, like that's what we wanted to do, but we didn't want to like, fund a full season and then have it be a cliffhanger. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. Yeah. That is helpful. I just need someone to put like a metaphorical gun to my head and be like, you get 10 episodes and that's it. Deal with it, or whatever.
I have a question.
You want
for
me to
you.
do it?
Yeah. Like,
somebody might need
Are you an outliner, or are you like a pantser, or are you like some hybrid between the two?
Some hybrid between the two. I definitely lean toward outlining because I'm somebody where, again, propensity to overthink everything. So it's like and this is probably a fault of my own writing and me being a control freak of like
a feature, not a fault, a feature.
I like that. Thank you.
Elevate. You're up here. You're not down there. You're up here.
That's fair. Thank you. Appreciate that. I like to feel like the hand of God and know everything that's going on, right? So like I want to know what all the continent names are. I want to know what all the characters, their whole deal, their background, their family, where they're coming from. Like I want all of that done before I sit down to tell story. And I know as I do it that is not conducive to getting things done.
Oh, totally.
And I'm better than I used to be, but like it's just a thing where I'm like, but I don't know what this person's last name is, so I can't possibly write about them. And it's like, well, I could just throw something in or throw in 3 X's and fill it in later. But I'm a control freak. And so and it's also, I think, a little bit of an imposter syndrome thing where you will like create obstacles to keep yourself from doing things that you want to do just from like the horror of being perceived. I think that's probably in there as well.
I want to give you a shout out, or I'll give you a little like boost of confidence if I can. I'm a map guy. I make fantasy maps. No one in the world knew that I wrote anything. There was a few select people. One person on my writing team knew that I was working on like fantasy novels and sci-fi novels and have projects in the works for those things. And we were chatting about it and they were like, this is a year and a half ago now. They're like, you have something to tell. I think you should really give it a shot. You should put it out there. Your desire to have it perfect before perceived is not your actual goal. You don't want it to go bad. Like you don't want it to go bad. You don't want to deliver an unbaked cake and then be judged by a panel of culinary artists. You know, like that's the fear, right? That's the fear that somehow our value is tied to the art we produce. And it's just not that way, you know. It like we can get a gleam, like we can get a little hint at like our value by our ability, but it's just one small part of us. So I sat down, I challenged myself to write an audio drama. I reached out to a bunch of authors and I pulled them into a Discord call and I said, hey, I'm terrible at writing dialogue. Do you have any tips for me? They gave me some tips. And then I wrote an audio drama and then now we're here and the writing team made it better. But I had the same feelings about control and not wanting to be perceived and judged. And I totally empathize with you. You do have something to tell. I think the both of you have stories to tell. And my encouragement to you is to divorce yourself of the potential criticism, knowing that you are far more critical of yourself than anyone would ever be of you. And if you can make some small concessions in your ability to provide art to the world, you're going to be rewarded for it. That hurdle for me opened incredible doors. It got me in contact with amazing people, amazingly talented people that were like, yeah, let's do this. Let's make it better. Let's make it bigger. Thank you so much. Like, and it all came with a challenge. Like, I think you should put your writing art out into the world and see what happens. I can tell from both your like excitement and trepidation that you do feel like you have something really powerful to tell and like beautiful to tell. And that resonates with me already. I'm very eager to know about it. Like, and I think that would come through in your writing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I just had Ollie sit down with me and talk through, like, because I love to just torture myself and be like, let's do everything at once. So I'm like outlining a novel as well. And so we just talked through the magic system of that and figured out how that wanted to work. And so I had to like pitch her the story that I had so far, which like she's my best friend. So that was horrifying to do. Just
it's hard.
The horror of being perceived.
It's so hard.
Fair, but I'm the last person to judge you.
Ollie, get with it right now. We're cringing at the idea of sharing.
It had nothing to do with you and everything to do with my brain. Like, yeah, I was sweating. It was bad mentally for me. Like once we were talking about it, it was fine. But like when I was like going through like, this is what I have, I'm like, I would like to fall through to the center of the earth. That would be great. Because it's that thing of, it's like, what if it's nothing? Right? Like, what if everything's been done before and it's nothing? And you can know that is false. And it's like, there is nothing new under the sun and everything is derivative. And still there are 1,000,001 stories that have not been told yet that deserve to be told and exist in the world. And also, it is very easy for your brain to find things and be like, well, the thing I want to do is just like XYZ, but maybe probably worse. And like, I do write for a living and I know I'm a good writer and I put a lot of maybe not a lot, but some of my self-esteem into that. Right. So it's a different thing for me for like, what if I'm wrong? Right.
I'm going to build you both up. Let's talk about this for a second. Nobody hates books more than the authors that wrote them, right?
Yeah.
So that's where we've established a baseline. The best books ever written were written for no one other than the author themselves. Full stop. Some of your fear and trepidation about being judged and being perceived and like critiqued as a creative are valid. I feel those every day, but I know that the moment I realized that, like, from the archetypes of the characters I designed, their trajectories and ending points within the story, they all are allegorical references to personal experiences. If you were to split me into 8 parts, you would have these 8 characters. And their arc in this story is reflective of something I've experienced in my life, right? Whether that's homelessness or like violence or whatever. Like I've gone through amazing things, and putting these characters as allegorical effigies to be burned in honor of those things, that was for me. And the moment I divorced myself of the idea that people weren't going to like the story and focused only on telling the best story to come out of my personal experience through these 8 representations, that's when the writing got good. And that's when my hackles were no longer raised and I could relax a little bit.
Yeah.
And I can tell, because of your passion, that you do have something special you want to share with the world, and we're going to make it happen. Me and Ollie got your back.
Fair.
Like, we're going to make this happen. We're switching themes on the podcast, everybody. We're going to be talking about Mariah's book.
Yeah, go nuts.
Welcome to the Tabletop Podcast.
Lord have
I'm
mercy.
Cody James King.
I will pitch you the podcast idea after we
Let's talk. I would love to hear it,
because I love running that by people. But it's okay. I like the thing, because I'd been toying around with that. I'm like, I do the thing of like, I feel like I need constraints, specifically with the audio drama, because with like novels, it's easier because you sort of just know what that is. And like, so you've read so many books, and you're like, it's different consuming an audio drama and then like creating one, where it's like you can read a book and you're like, okay, I can kind of get the gist of like the structure of this and what it is. And like, we're taught different structures in school and things like that, where it's like audio drama, it's like, I don't know, good luck, comrade.
It's hard,
I guess.
What we had to do is we went and found other audio dramas and found access to their script, and we started reading the scripts and seeing how they're structured with like sound cues, audio cues, and it's written almost like a stage play. I have a great resource for this. It's a BBC radio stage play from the 1950s and 60s. And there's a format that they used, which is great. It's just like a stage theater production, but it's meant for audio dramas. I just filled in that format. Like I used it, and it was hugely helpful.
Yeah,
there's also, I mean, the fact that like, right. There's also the fact, I mean, like, this is although you've taken spear point in like writing it eventually, it is like, I am here for you in the same way that, you know, I didn't realize it was that hard for you to come to me to talk about.
I know.
I was sitting here vibing, excited, and I was like, yeah, tell me about your book. And then like going off on a tangent. So I'm very proud of you, first of all, for doing that.
Yeah, me too.
It was only hard for like the first 2 minutes. And then after we got into it, I was like, oh, this is just what we do. Of like, because like I'm very fortunate to have like you and Oak and Kay and like all of our other friends we've met through the street, where it's like, and Cody now who is like my writing therapist now.
That's
you will be added to some, you will mess around and get added to some Discord servers.
Let's go.
But who like, we tell so many stories, and we write so much stuff that like no one ever sees, that it's just kind of for our own little hyperfixation enjoyment, that it's like I do have an element of like a safe space to brainstorm and be like, okay, this is a problem, this is a whole, like, why does this matter, how does this work, how does this tie into everything else? But yeah, there is still like, I think of like, you stand up with your metaphorical PowerPoint presentation and you're like, here's my thing. And if it's only primarily ever existed in your head, you don't know. It becomes real when you say it, right? And so like, you can know you can know you have skills, you can know that you have experience in elements of crafts, but like, there is still always an element of unknown and a releasing of control when you allow it to be seen and experienced by other people at any level. When it's done, like when you finish a book or you finish an audio drama and you put it out into the world, like the consumption of it is that last step of the creation, right? It's not done until people consume it. And it's the same like with the ideating stage. Well, it's just like, it's more raw and ugly and messy because it's not tied up and pretty and done at that point.
It's also
huge.
to the
Go ahead.
almost in a micro sense, because like I'm not as much of a writer. I write like role play stuff for sure, but I have never been active in writing the way that like Mariah is, but I am an artist, so I understand the level of critique on oneself where other people will look at my art and be like, this is amazing, and I'm like, it's the worst thing I've ever done in my life, and
you're like, I didn't blend that cheekbone right.
Correct.
And like, that's
and, like
all you
imperceivable imperfections that no one else will ever catch but me. But it's also like to the element and degree of, you know, if you fear being perceived, then you'll rob other people of the joy of experiencing your art.
Yeah.
In the sense of like us and our table, to bring it back to that. If I was terrified of potentially DMing ever and never thought it was something I would ever fucking pick up, because I just made up in my mind how difficult it would be and how much of a task.
You didn't only make that up in your mind. There was someone else that influenced that, because the same person influenced that for me. Because I don't think either one of us would have ever started running games for any group other than this group of 4. Those are our best friends.
If I had let that like fear persist and didn't pick it up, we literally would not have the story that we're telling 2 years later that all of us love and enjoy and hyperfixate till we are chomping at the bit about. And if I let the fact that like I'm not a perfect DM, I'm still learning, I fuck up. But if I let that inhibit me, we wouldn't have the joy of experiencing that story together.
Yeah, that's
we wouldn't be hyperfixating about the shit you're hyperfixating about.
See and love ourselves the way our friends see and love us, like it'd be so much easier.
Right. Yeah.
We'd be in such a good spot.
Remember 20 minutes ago when I said it was going to be a clean read, and then it was like,
it was in fact the cleanest read.
Yeah.
Let's go.
It was a sniper bullet from afar.
I know who I am. I'm not unaware.
It's hard. Like, I feel what both of you feel, like as an artist and a writer, right? So like I'm somebody that I've been writing the same book since 2009 when I was a very young man. And I was like, and I remember distinctly handing this story to someone. It was like handwritten in pencil, and it was like 15 pages in cursive, because I can only write in cursive for whatever reason. They read
it. Love that. That's incredibly romantic that you can only write in cursive.
And I'm left-handed, so let's just put that
there. You go.
I'm a nightmare person. I'm a left-handed cursive writer. So imagine the smudges, like when you handed that paper to someone. They were really amazing. At the time, it was really hard for me, but they just told me that I have a lot of passion for writing, but I had no ability. And I didn't know what that meant at the time, other than I was gagging and throwing up and like trying not to cry. But I was like,
no one has told me that, and I feel like I got shot by an arrow. I would stab myself with a pencil on sight if someone told me that.
There's a couple formative moments in my life. It's not like I'm not going to remember that one forever. That was a big one. I have a deep passion for writing, but I do not have any ability. And that just stuck with me. But it was super true. I look back at those things now. I have all of those like writing still. And I could not put a story together, a cohesive order of events. I had to ask myself, if I wrote this down sequentially in bullet point sentences, would it be a story? And the answer was no. Right? It was an amalgamation of events and ideas and thoughts that were incoherent, right? And that crushed my soul. And then I had to slowly reforge it over a long time. I made a lot of pacts with entities, otherworldly entities, to make that happen. But I know that feeling of like the worst case scenario of like handing art to someone and getting that feedback. And it put a big block on me, and I wasted a lot of time. What I came to the conclusion of is, am I afraid of telling a story and getting criticism? Am I more like adverse to that than I am excited about the potential of making people happy, or making people excited, or giving them a new like fixation? Like, am I more swayed by fear aversion than I am by the potential of making other people happy? And I decided to lean into the optimistic, to lean into the positive, to trust that my goal was good, to make people happy, and to try it. So I would encourage you to go there, because it makes Ollie happy. It's going to make me happy. It's going to make your other friends happy. So if not for yourself, do it for them.
It's also like just the flat out fact that like no matter what you do in anything, you will never please anybody, but you are going to find the people that specifically resonate with what you are trying to do, be, etc. And those are the people that matter. And that's just a blanket fact. And as long
whatever
as
you
if
do,
it's
you're not
good
going to
enough
please
for you,
everybody.
there's other yous out there that will like it.
That statement that you said, where like whatever you do, you're not going to please anybody. I thought you were talking about like the dating world, and I was like, true, bro. Like, there's a lot of letdowns out there.
It applies
true for
to
everything.
100%, bro. Like,
whether
Yeah.
it's your self-identity,
how
your
you
sense
dress,
of style,
what you talk. Yeah.
Right.
your art, your job, your dating, all of it. Whatever you do, you're not going to please everybody, blanket out fact. Or if you do, you're not being true to yourself. And that depth will be taken in time.
Yeah.
But you're doing stuff to make yourself happy, and it's if you are happy with it, that's all that fucking matters. And if nobody else in the world likes it but you, then that's enough. But I guarantee you that there will be other yous out there that will find what you're doing, find what you're being, find what you're saying, etc., and will be like, I fuck with that.
Me too.
Yeah, fully. I mean, we've experienced that with like this podcast, even where it's like we very much started this with just like vibes and a dream of just like
a couple of raccoons in a trench coat,
2 bitches and a microphone, like kind of
all
thing.
All dreams start like that. 2 bitches in a microphone. Like it's just like the way it happens.
And like people came up to us and they're like, no, like we were really impacted by certain episodes. And there's that moment where like in between the weird, like raccoon in a trench coat jokes, like, we had an effect. And like, that's very cool.
It's so cool. Like, yeah. Oh, see, this is good. I'm glad I did this. Like, I'm glad I come to hang out with you guys and like to like just remind you that you're awesome. I have a weird question.
You're awesome too. Yeah,
go for it.
It's a weird question.
There's a video game that came out a little while ago. It wasn't a big it was kind of a small like indie hit. It's called Baldur's Gate 3. Have you ever played that?
I may have heard.
We've heard
a couple of things about it.
Great game. Yeah, it's
made a couple of cunty characters for vibes.
Great European studio. Larian Studios. But anyway, I love that game, and I've been playing that game for a while. I did the beta, like when it, like well, not the beta, like the pre-release or whatever that came out like years ago. It was basically just a character creator and like part of the first act. But one thing I really loved about that game was the people interacting at camp, like the party members talking at the campsite, right? Sure, going around throwing barrels at people and like fighting goblins and stuff, whatever. That's cool. I could do that anywhere.
Little pyromania, never heard about it.
Yeah, the camp interactions, that and BioWare games like Dragon Age talking at camp,
yes.
Mass Effect talking on the ship, like playing Fem Shep and falling in love with like Garrick Vicari. Like,
those games are engraved into my very marrow.
Yeah,
Ollie dragged me by my scalp into them, and now I am in the hell with her.
My lower back tattoo says "Fem Shep is my daddy." Like that's
correct,
just
incredible,
as the good Lord intended. And on the 7th day, He said, "Get a Fem Shep Transdown."
Yep, and it was on November 7th, which is anyway, N7 day. Those games and their interactions, the idea of like interacting with people in a static setting, even though they're world hopping and going across these big adventures. That was the inspiration for The Long Rest, because I found that the most interesting stories in those games and in those kinds of like books, Lord of the Rings, the things that would happen like between Sam and Frodo when they were like camping were far more intimate and interesting to me in the books and in the movies than they were the fact that they're putting the ring in Mount Doom. Like, I just loved those things, right? And so I when I set out to write The Long Rest, I was like, when a party stops and breaks bread together, what baggage did they bring home from like the chaos that they endure? And so we put these people in this collapsing ruin, the loss of their leader, and then we put them under emotional and psychological duress. And then all of their like psyche, their shadow, their id, their connections all start to crack and fray. And that was like truly the inspiration for it. So like shout out to the BioWare game, shout out to Larian Studios for Baldur's Gate 3. Great camp dynamics and giving like my actors an opportunity to like carry the weight of like their backstories and like the show Bible we provided them into those performances, because they're just super fun, super great.
I love the notion of the downtime is where the development happens, because it's so true in a lot of forms of media. And it reminded me of me and Mariah were in a one shot that was streamed, and it was, what was the name of the game? It was
Before the Storm.
Before the Storm. The entire game is played within the downtime before the final battle.
Yeah, it's like the night before this last stand battle that's you can live, but it's presumably like the rest of the world's been
That's
taken
genius.
over by
Yeah.
the storm, and like you're the last bastion of humanity, and it's like presumably like you ain't gonna make it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, it's a
It is
very
characters you've made that already have a history, but the history writes itself in that downtime action. So
Yeah.
you are basically you are pairing off in scenes and having flashbacks. And then at the end, there's like a deck of cards. And so you can cash one in to have a flashback with a specific person. You can set the scene. You can ask other players to play NPCs within that scene. And someone can eventually yell, like, cut whenever the scene is done.
Mhm.
And it's a bunch of flashbacks, and you start discovering how these characters are connected and the depths of their connection in the moment. And it's so good.
It's
And
very fun.
wild how quickly that caused our characters to have such in-depth connections and development, to the point that I was in tears by the time the game
Same.
finished.
Yeah.
I
You would
love
have
that
thought we had
so
spent an
much.
entire campaign together.
Yeah, it was wild.
So I love that. Like that makes me like my heart just swell, because those are the moments that I live for as like a consumer of media. And then like the things that I want to like role play in or like write and create. So our trick was like, we're starting media res, right? Everyone's in the middle of chaos. How do you characterize people's like depth when they're under duress?
Mhm.
And we found really interesting ways. So I'm going to give you a little spoiler, a teeny little spoiler.
A little baby one.
One of the characters is talking about where they're going to sleep after the events of the ruin. So this is like scene 2 or scene 3. And they're like, one character says, "Hey, I see Caden setting up the tents. I'm going to go stop him. He's putting mine next to Garrick's." And then the other person laughs, and they're like, "I don't know why you're so weird about that." And they make a mocking comment. They're like, "You know what Attalus always says? Rotations are important when in camp. It keeps factions from forming." And then later on, you realize that that was a narcissistic tool by an abuser to keep everyone at arm's length from one another. And it's just insane. Like
I
our
love that.
ability to like seed in the show.
That's cool.
It was super fun. So I love that you guys are inspired by the same things and motivated by the same things, because like that's where my heart lives, not in the sword wielding, spell casting, battling of ancient dragons. It's in the aftermath, the fatigue, the exhaustion, the beleaguered nature of like, we want it, but what cost? Like maybe not to the world, but to myself. Like, what did I give up so others can continue? Like, those are the questions that motivate me as a media consumer and as a writer. So I found my people. It's the two of you. Like, you're my friends, my audience. Like, this is so great.
Yeah. Yeah. Like the human aspect of storytelling is always what I'm there for. And it's like, it's kind of why I chose to run Vampire the Masquerade when I was wanting to run something. I mean, I'd been a fan of like Jason Carl and LA by Night and New York by Night and like all that for years. But when I pitched the game to like the girls, it was like, okay, you're all monsters. You all have to prey on innocence to some degree to live because you are vampires. Like the world is inherently dark and flawed in that way. And so it's like, what are you doing? How are you wrestling with the vestiges of your humanity that remain? How much of your humanity remains? And then so I get to play with that with all of these NPCs who are, some of them are ancient. And so they don't have any humanity. They have the structures that they've ruled by or like what they think should be done. But like they don't have any care for actual humans. They're tools or food or cannon fodder or something. Like that is so far gone. And like that, but they have care for some things. And then it's like, why? And what if you take that away? And how do you push and pull? And it gets to the point where it's like, I will forget that they're all vampires. That's the least interesting thing about the characters, is that the specific type of monster they are. It's like, well, what are you doing with that?
That's just the forbidden Capri Sun we used to snack on. Everything else is much more interesting.
Oh, that's so interesting. I love that. Like the idea of like morality deteriorating, but still having a sense of like justice and right and wrong, and how juxtaposed those two things are. So I have a project that I'm working on. I have a literary agent who only does fantasy and a few other things like nonfiction and stuff. And they don't like sci-fi. They just don't. They're just not a
Mhm.
sci-fi person. I made a pitch to them. I said, this is what I want to write. And their response was, yes, let's write it. And then they text me a few days later and they're like, I was watching my son build a fire in the backyard and I could not stop thinking about your sci-fi book because it's like a modern retelling of the Prometheus myth from like Greek mythology.
Ooh.
And it touches on exactly that, what you were talking about, Mariah, like your characters having a sense of like diminishing morality, but still maintaining a sense of like moral like an independent sense of justice. Like I
Mhm.
care about some things. I know right from wrong for within my frame of mind, but these people are just like, they're not even people. They're Capri Suns, if you will,
Yeah.
like having those kind of questions. The premise is very, very like interesting. It's Prometheus brought fire to man, and in doing so lit up the darkness and allowed mankind to civilize at the chagrin of Zeus, which is actually
Yep.
like his nephew, because Prometheus is a Titan, a progenitor before Zeus. And anyway, the thought was a modern, real world, like near future scientist comes up with a revolutionary technology that changes what it means to have mortality, like whether we can elect to die or not. And
Mhm.
in the revelation of this technology, these things that are like called Promethean cells, in this symposium, upon their revelation and sharing them with the world, people realize in real time as he's sharing this discovery, he's not only sharing it with this symposium, like an allegorical, like Nobel Peace Laureate,
Yeah.
but he's sharing it. He's sharing it with the world, sending
It's
it
like live
out,
streaming it.
like sharing the entire data set to every company, every person all over the planet. And it's like literally setting fire into the darkness. Like, because if he
Yeah.
knows that if somebody bought it, somebody did something, or if they patented it, like it would be a nightmare
They
overnight.
would capitalize on it.
It would be
Yeah.
abused. And so he seeds the world that's like already like in the latter stages of like capitalist like peak, if you will, like
Mhm.
they're already on the downturn and they're like, it's not a good place. And he brings this out. And then at the end of that first like chapter prologue, we pick up the story 300 years later and we're experiencing the world that came after this
Oh,
revelation.
interesting.
And it's an absolute nightmare. It is like
Yeah.
God.
nightmare hellscape, somewhere between solar punk sci-fi and like dark dystopian. But those same questions about morality and justice and what's right from wrong, and like they all get really played on in a deep, deep, meaningful way. See, you guys are like, we should be friends. Like we're talking,
Yeah.
we love the
Oh,
same stories.
absolutely.
Like,
Yeah.
like
Add me literally on everything.
Yeah. Oh,
we're gonna
same.
be so tight.
Fully.
We're gonna talk
I think I
storytelling all
already
day.
follow you on most things, so yeah, just add us
Yeah,
back. But
I need
like,
to reciprocate because like I could talk stories with you guys all day.
God, yeah, I have like a very specific niche interest around like the link between immortality and like psychopathy or sociopathy in villains in media, where it's like I fully think like the human consciousness is not meant to exist for
last that long,
right? Like there's an expiration date on that bad boy, and you were supposed to press hard reset and carry on forward. But if you don't, and if you exist and if you see everyone around you die and you see empires fall and you see religions come and die, like what is left of you, of what you were originally? Because you have to, like, we go through so many death and rebirth cycles in our lives in general that it's like when you spread that over millennia, like, no, there's no hope for you. Like, it's going to be bad.
Yeah, this the exact same thing. Like the antagonist of that book lives indefinitely. He's one of the first adopters of the Promethean cell technology in that book, and their conversations are very much alike, like that, where they talk about like in the first few X amount of time that this character like was expecting to go on, they thought that like, oh, my mind will deteriorate and I will have the release of psychopathy. I'll be able to like go crazy like with life. But because of the way that the cells works, he never deteriorated. And so the burden of morality, justice, like reality, like he never is divorced of it. So he's tortured by the opposite. It's preservation. That like then he's driven insane not by time, but how unchangeable and predictable
the
mortals
patterns
are, people are.
Yeah.
That like that when you how do you not watch a people group repeat the cycles of violence and ignorance?
Do the same
and,
mistakes.
Yeah. And at what point do you become sick of that? And then you decide to dictate upon them a reality that is for them, that is better for them. And those are the questions. That. Yeah. So that's where we go. And it's to the like
as a girl that grew up in the Baptist church, like
So we'll be talking. Yes,
that hits. That's some Old Testament shit. Where exactly. It's like, like at what point do you almost become like a deific level of omniscience, where it's like, hey, if you can't
y'all
do
don't
it,
know
if you
what's good for you,
yeah, it's
I
like
need
this
to
is why we can't have nice things. Stop chewing on the furniture. I'll just take over. And it's like, is that right? No, but also like. It gets so sticky and messy, and I love fucked up characters with my whole entire heart. And so I'm like, I
won't tell too much because I'm going to write it and publish it, but like it'll be between us and whoever listens. There's a scene where the antagonist is talking to the protagonist and reminds them, and it's almost like he's talking to the world, even though it's a very intimate one-on-one conversation, that he is not special. That his forefathers and their forefathers, with the same level of ignorance, the same level of hubris, came to his doorstep with all of the pride and righteousness that they could muster, only to be sent away wanting. That this insanity, this repetition through procreation, that you think you are special and worthy of saving, is a malady that I will remedy. And it's it's a really intense like scene where like you build up to this thing and you're like, the hero's going to do the thing. Wait a second. Oh my God. Like, we're ignorant children. Please don't hurt us, Dad.
Yeah. It's like, are we really only just a sad derivative of everything that came before?
We're just petulant. Like,
well, it's the thing I love the most. Like, I do this in our own Strixhaven campaign where I do not have any actual true villains. I'm like, everyone just has motivations, and it depends on what side of the coin you are on. Like, I introduce NPCs, and if you happen to feel like they're in the wrong, then that's your perspective. But you can also kind of see where they're coming from.
Yeah,
everyone does heinous shit in my VTM campaign.
100%.
Everyone.
Absolutely.
It's just whose war crimes closely align with your own motivations.
Yeah.
Oh, that's rough.
Incredible. Well, it does look like we are not even coming up on time, way over time, but this has been so good. And I've enjoyed every second of it.
Yeah, you guys are wonderful. Thank you for having me. Thank you for letting me talk about my projects and just share with you both and to build you both up, like when you're writing endeavors. Like that was really
I was chomping at the bit, and you sent that DM, and I couldn't respond fast enough. I was like, abso-fucking-lutely.
That's so cool.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. Give our listeners a quick little reminder about you, where they can find you, as well as where they can go follow all your cool projects, and especially the Kickstarter.
Yeah, Cody James King. I go by DungeonMasterDiary, and you can find me at DungeonMasterDiary on all social media platforms. And we have a Kickstarter called The Long Rest, which is a supernatural fantasy thriller. It's an audio drama. It's got an amazing cast and crew. And shout out to Callahan. I didn't mention Callahan. Callahan is the sound designer, sound engineer, one-person team, literally a deity embodied. Callahan is a superhero, so thank you to Callahan. But yeah, Dungeon Master's Diary, Kickstarter is The Long Rest, and thank you for having me.
Of course. And thank you guys for listening. We will see y'all next time. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Table Talk is a podcast brought to you by Mythos Media Productions, bringing you a new episode every Wednesday, wherever you get your podcasts. Find us on Instagram and TikTok at Table Talk RPG, or check us out at our website, mythosmediaproductions.godaddyscites.com. All business inquiries can reach out to us via email at info@mythosmediaproductions.com.